What's up guys, today we're going to be going over the Arc 3.0 Hunter build, building around the classic combo of 1-2 punch and Liar's Handshake, and overall seeing what Arc 3.0 brings to the table for this build. This was truly one of the first builds in the game before there were really builds with mods and things like that, and it's been around forever, so let's see how good it is right now. So starting off with a new subclass. So the same dodge that we've always used to make this build happen is going to be Gamer's Dodge to get our full melee back whenever we dodge near a enemy. But now the combination blow is now a melee option, and this will give us more melee damage and give us our full class ability back whenever we get a arc melee final blow. So without any stacks we hit for this 8k number. Now if we go and get combination blow times 1, it'll go up to that number, times 2, up to 22,000, and finally with times 3, the max cap, it'll go up to 35,000. So combination blow is a 1.6, a 2.5-ish, and a 4.1x at times 3. But now there is a new aspect that will greatly increase our melee damage, and that's gonna be Lethal Current, where after dodging, your next melee attack has increased lunge range, jolts the target, and creates a damaging aftershock. Also damaging any jolted target with melee attacks will blind them. So this aspect alone changes the way this entire build works. One is for Actor, every single arc melee will now jolt, which will be kind of like built-in arc web from old Warlock, and will greatly increase the AoE Actor potential of this build. But the second part of this is it will greatly increase the damage of your first melee for like a boss fight. By doing this arc explosion and jolting them, doing actually more damage than the melee itself. So we start adding things into this combo. The first and most obvious one is a 1-2 punch shotgun, preferably an arc shotgun. I'm using the Found Verdict. I think there's a few in the game that are arc and have 1-2 punch on them, but this should increase the melee damage by 3x. So doing that, as you see, it does, but also increases the damage of the arc explosion by 3x also, which is pretty crazy. The next thing we can throw in on top of that is the old classic Liar's Handshake. Using your arc melee ability or being hit by melee attack will allow you to follow up with an extremely powerful melee counterpunch that will heal you. And as you see, I tested stuff for this video for like 3 or 4 hours, and I practically could never proc cross punch from actual getting hit by melees. It definitely didn't work on boss stomps. Once in a blue moon it would proc from receiving melee damage, but it was super inconsistent. But the thing about this is every single time I use my arc melee, it will proc the cross counter, which is a buff you see on your screen. So now adding that into the full combo, it doesn't stack quite like it used to do, but it's still gonna be another huge increase for melee damage, where the second melee of the combo will now hit for 191,000. So the second melee in the combo will be doing a total of 22.14x more melee damage, which is obviously quite high. And that full combo should be there for every other melee hit on a long boss fight. So that is obviously extremely good. Another damage increase to our melee will be Spark of Feedback, where taking melee damage briefly increases your outgoing melee damage. And once again, just like the cross counter, no matter how many times I try to let a boss, not only this one, but other bosses in the game stop me, it seemed to never proc it. But for regular melee attacks from enemies, as you see, you get feedback for 5 seconds. And this will only work for your first melee. So once you get hit by a melee attack, you have 5 seconds to then melee something and get the increased melee damage. And we look at damage on Carl of what this increase should be with the full stack of everything else. We'll take the melee damage to 149,000, and it did increase the explosion damage. So when stacked with everything else, the feedback is doing 1.4x more damage for a total on the first melee of 17.22x. And we can further increase our melee damage with Wells of Ion, where picking up an arc elemental well will increase the damage of your next melee attack. So once again, this will only work on the first melee. And as you see, it'll be a 1.3x modifier. And one thing I didn't show off in this clip is that it does not increase the damage of the arc explosion. And the final thing we can add in to increase the melee damage will be a debuff, for example, Tractor Cannon, and that will be another 1.3x. So all in all, there's a lot of stuff increasing our melee damage, and most of them are very easy to have at all times. The only one that is kind of questionable is Spark of Feedback. But let's say you'll have everything going. Your first punch will do 29.1x damage, and your second punch will actually be lower at 28.7. And we can't forget that the first melee will also do the arc explosion, basically doubling the damage output of your first melee. So overall, the full combo would just be walking up to an enemy, boss, wherever it is, tractor canning them, then pulling out your shotgun to proc 1-2 punch, and doing 2 melees, which you can do with 1 proc of 1-2 punch. So with all that going on, our DPS of this combo is 446,000, and our total damage output in just that 1.8 seconds is 819,000, both of which are obviously extremely high numbers. So yeah, this build is pretty broken. Now, it might not be the highest melee damage this build has ever done because the way they stack now, but with the lethal current aspect where it will do the arc explosion, I think it's arguably just as strong, if not better than it ever was. One, because you make up a lot of the lost damage from melee stacking with the arc explosion on your first melee, making your first melee do over double damage it normally would. But then for ad clear, you know, this build was never the most efficient thing in the road for ad clear. It was great for high health targets, but unless you're gonna melee every single little red bar, it wasn't that efficient. You would just use your primary or whatever. But now with the fact that every arc melee will also jolt, and the damage from the arc explosion does increase with all the different melee things we have going on, I mean, you're just gonna be killing everything nearby from the thing that you punch. And looking at the rest of our build, we can go even further using flow state to become amplified when we defeat a jolted target. And while we're amplified, we'll get all kinds of stat increases. And now we can kind of work for a grenade build, so using Spark of Shock, so our grenade jolts also along with our melee. Then we have Ions to create ionic traces whenever we defeat a jolted target. And finally, we have Amplitude to create Orbs of Power by getting rapid kills while amplified. And this is on a cooldown, but will be happening quite often. And now looking at all of our mods, the first one we'll have is Melee Wellmaker to create the arc elemental wells on all of our arc melee kills. And we have Hands On to get our super a lot quicker. Then on our gloves, this is going to be one of the most important things. We have first Font of Might, which you could use this. You're only going to be increasing the damage of your shotgun, so you could also use something like Font of Wisdom, or really whatever mod you want here. But the most important thing is Impact Induction, having 2 of them to get a huge chunk of our grenade back when we use our melee attack. Then our next mod of choice will be Wells of Ions, as we showed off earlier for the melee damage increase on our first melee. And our next mod will be Elemental Ordnance to create even more arc wells when we use our grenade. And another important thing is 2 innervations to get a huge chunk of our grenade back when we pick up the orbs that we're making from our fragment. And finally, on our class item, we have Bountiful Wells to get 2 arc wells from our melee and grenades, Bomber to get a chunk of our grenade back when we dodge, and finally this artifact mod to increase the damage of our arc super if we cast while amplified. And I'm definitely making a video about super damage, so I'll include a lot more about this in that video. And now with all of that going on, not only do we have a crazy melee build, but now we can get our grenade back almost just as fast, and our grenade will also jolt things and be extremely strong. And then when we get to a boss fight, not only do we have the full 1-2 punch combo, we can also throw down our super, which will do damage over time and further increase your DPS and total damage output while doing the melee attacks. And usually when I'm using this build, I use a swashbuckler primary, preferably one with range, for example the smite, because obviously we'll be doing melees for all the up close enemies. Having a range primary is very good. Then if you want to take this build into the end game, put on a scout, and now you have access to not only anti-barrier with scout, you have a shotgun for unstoppable shotgun. Then on your class item, you have the one where arc grenades will stun overloads. So you have very, very easy access to all 3 champion mods with this build this season. And you have way more damage than you'll ever need to kill the champions themselves. So this is definitely one of the best in-game builds in the game right now. And on top of all that, both Liar's Handshake and Combination Blow will give you chunks of health back whenever you use your arc melee. And really all you need to do is pair it with, you know, maybe a lot of resilience. Then your secondary stat would be either discipline or intellect, and you're going to be good to go, and you're going to be able to just run down every enemy in the game. For the high health targets, the full combo will easily kill them, and most time 1 punch, definitely 2 if necessary. Then for the actor, the thing that this build kind of lacked traditionally is now extremely good too, with the fact that both our grenade and our melee will jolt, and Jolt is one of the strongest active lanes in the game right now. Practically turns all of your abilities into like a chain reaction type explosion or arc web from old Warlock. So yeah, this build is a real deal. It really has no flaws anymore. I think it was always one of the best for in-game activities with like champions and things like that, but now I think it's just all around good at everything. So yeah, I think that's gonna be it for the commentary. If you're looking to pre-order Lightfall and you play on Steam, you can do so on my Nexus store. Links will be in the description and comments. A dim link to this build will be in both spots also. So yeah, let me know what you think about this build and if you've been using a slightly different version of it. The rest of the video will just be finishing out this solo Lost Sector gameplay. Like usual, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.